us. This is the Farmer-Led Trials 2024 Forum from the Organic Farming Research Foundation. My name is Thelma Velez. I am the Director of Research and Education Programs for the Organic Farming Research Foundation. And I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our presentation today. I'm also joined by Mary Hathaway, which is the Research and Education Program Manager, and Heather Estrada, who's the Research and Education Senior Scientist at OFRF. Our team also has other folks from communications and other departments on the call, so they will be able to put content in the chat. Please do review the chat. We're really excited to be here today to share a little bit more about our Farmer-Led Trail program. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our organization for those of you who have not heard about OFRF. Next slide, please. So the Organic Farming Research Foundation has been around for quite some time, and the presentations that we're covering today, that's okay, Mary, you can go back to the other one. There we go. Thank you. The presentations we're going to be covering today are going to be from Maggie Dungan of Salad Days Farm, Jorge Reyes of Reyes Vineyard, Nathan Lada of Green Things Farm Collective, and Rhianna Simes of Verdant Phoenix Farm. You can see the topics for their presentations, but I'm going to introduce those as they share their presentations later in the day. Next slide, please. So for today's talk, I'm going to give our background, a little bit more about the resources that we have available. Heather will share more about the farmer-led trials, what it looks like, what are the steps to doing that. We'll have our 4 farmer presenters who I just showed in the previous slide. And then we'll go into the details of our current program because we do have the application window open for a 2025 cycle. And then we'll have time for question and answers at the end of all of these talks. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. So a little bit about the Organic Farming Research Foundation. We have been around since 1990. Our mission is to improve the widespread adoption of organic farming systems. We do that because we really envision organic agriculture as the leading form of agriculture, right? We know that it contributes to healthy and resilient communities, ecosystems, and economies. And we are definitely there to support farmers. Next slide, please. So we take a 3-pronged approach to the work that we do, and we usually put those in the buckets of research, education, and advocacy. With respect to research, we have had a research grant program for over 30 years. Our goal is to fund innovative on-farm research that is advancing scientific knowledge. But alongside with that, we also partner with researchers across the country to help them get the word out about their findings. We also have a soon to launch Organic Research Hub, and this is going to be a centralized location for scientific findings that are relevant for organic farmers. This is really exciting. It will be coming out in February, and that's something that Heather has been working on. We also have our National Organic Research Agenda, which is research that we conduct, and we survey growers from across the country, and we ask them, what are your biggest needs? What are your challenges? And then all of that information can be found in our National Organic Research Agenda report, which will be put in the chat. And that's what informs our educational resources and our advocacy work as well. And so in terms of our education, if you go to our website at OFRF.org, you will see that we have free courses online for organic farming resources. We have fact sheets, we have soil health guidebooks, and then again, educational resources in other formats are available as well. We also have our Seeds of Success programming, which are our virtual events that we either meet with researchers and or farmers or both to share more about resources that growers need to advance their operations. And then in our advocacy work, we really push for federal programs and policies to support organic growers. This is a big part of the work that we do, and we have a fantastic team led by Gordon Merrick who is doing that. Next slide, please. So why did we choose to launch a farmer-led trial program? This is our pilot year. This is the first set of farmers that have participated in this program. We wanted to make sure that farmers were in the driver's seat. So our research grants program is extremely successful, and we love being able to collaborate more closely with researchers. Often those were early career researchers, BIPOC researchers that were partnering with farmers to do a project. But from our farmer-led trial program, what we did is really kind of flip it and then give those farmers the opportunity to say, I have questions and I need answers very quickly. Our program is meant to reduce the risk by offsetting some of the financial costs, but at the same time, the real heart of the program is to offer technical support. So how can we help growers who want to set up a trial and perhaps maybe test a seed variety against another seed variety? We will help you walk you through the process, learn what is a research question, what is a good hypothesis, how can you collect your data, and all of this information is available then ultimately for all of the other farmers who want to pursue the program. So you'll hear from our farmers these are 4 of our farmers. We do have 9 in the first year, but you'll hear from 4 farmers today, and they'll share their findings and what that process looked like for them. Additionally, we do have a guide. So Mary, next slide. We developed a guide to on-farm research, and this is the Farmer's Guide to On-Farm Research. You can stay on this slide, Mary. We do really appreciate that this program was funded through the Transition to Organic Partnership Program and also Farmers Advocating for Organic. And with those resources, not only are we helping the farmers, but we developed a guide. So on the next slide, you'll see the guide, and we'll put the link to the guide in the chat. But this guide is critical if you're interested in trying to participate in this program. Then you definitely want to make sure you familiarize yourself with the guide, because the guide walks you through the steps for preparing a research trial on your farm and what will this look like ultimately. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to Heather, who is going to talk to you a little bit more about the steps to conducting on-farm trial, and then we'll move on and share the findings from all of our farmers.
Thank you, Thelma. Good day, everyone. It's really nice to see so many people on the call today. My name is Heather Estrada, and I am the Senior Research Scientist at OFRF, and I'm going to quickly walk you through the process of conducting an on-farm research trial. And as Thelma said, if you'd like to learn more, you can look at the Farmer's Guide to Conducting On-Farm Research, which is linked in the chat. And before I start, I just want to thank all of our farmers and just say what an amazing process this was to go through with all of our farmers. And I'm really excited for them to be able to share with you today all the hard work that they did on these on-farm trials. Next slide, please. So so we start at step 1. When we're starting a research trial, the first step really is to come up with a research question. And ideally, this is going to be a question that a farmer researcher has about a production issue or a challenge on their farm. A really great example of this is our first presenter today, Maggie Dungan, who came up with the question, which is posed right here: what is the effect of solarization on the beneficial microbes in the high tunnel over time? When Maggie came to us, she was using solarization as a weed control technique, but she had questions about how it was affecting her farm's soil microbes, especially given the high temperatures and so on that we see under these tarps. So she developed a very clear question that focused on a problem that could be addressed with a well-planned research trial and some very targeted data collection. Next slide, please. So step 2 is deciding what to measure in response to the treatment that is being applied. And I'm going to use that word treatment here and there. And really what I mean by that is the thing that is manipulated or changed within the experiment in order to observe its effect. So think things like different varieties or seeding rates or applications of compost. And in terms of data collection or measuring, intuitively, it's going to make sense to collect certain information like yield or crop biomass or soil properties, but there are a whole bunch of different things that might be valuable to measure. A good example of this is Nathan Lada, who will also present today. His research looked at the effect of row spacing on beet and radish yields, and he looked at both gross yield and then also marketable yield. And by doing that, he was able to gather more information from his trial. I think the take home here is you want to be really thoughtful about the data that you're collecting so that you can really answer your question while not taking too little data or too much data. And it's also a really good time to think about how much time and energy you have as a farmer to realistically dedicate to data collection, because that can make or break the trial and likely make or break you as well. Next slide, please. So step 3 is to figure out an experimental design. So it looks kind of complicated from this picture. Really what it involves is laying out the trial in a way that elevates it beyond a traditional just observation on your farm. And it helps us confidently say that there is or isn't an effect of those treatments, right? And it tells us that this is happening because of the treatments and not just an outcome that's happening by chance. And we do this generally through organizing the treatments into sets of replications, which is effectively just letting us do the trial multiple times, doing the test multiple times. And we arrange these replications into sets or blocks around a field. And that helps us control for things like a fertility gradient or a moisture gradient, or a change in soil type or something like that. And so having a structured experimental design like this is really what we're going for in an on-farm experiment. And it's one of the things that we at OFRF help our farmers to develop when we're developing an on-farm research trial. Next slide, please. Next is to figure out where the trial is going to go, which also takes a lot of consideration. The first big thing I think for people to wrap their head around is that they are probably going to be dedicating land solely to research. And so it's important to understand that these areas where the trials are may need to be out of production, or that harvests might be greater or less than what is expected. Some other things to think about are choosing fields based on things like previous cropping history, access to irrigation in order to conduct the trial, access to certain crops in the field. This was the case for Jorge Reyes, who is our grape farmer researcher, and he was working within a relatively newly acquired vineyard, which he will talk to you about today, and he had grapevines of different ages. So it was important for him to find grapevines of a similar age in order to do his trial on like pieces. And next slide, please. Thanks. Step 5 is to establish the trial or plant the trial and start to collect data. And for this, it's really just about organization. Farmers need plot maps and field markers to know where to plant the trial and so on. They also need supplies for collecting the data, like bags and tags and things like that, data sheets to stay organized. This can be something on a computer or just on a piece of paper that you take out to the field. And then probably most importantly, a data collection schedule. This graphic shows it's a very simplified version of Rhianna Simes' data collection schedule, which she will talk to you about today as well. It shows, just, I guess, kept her on track in terms of when she was planting a trial, when she was weeding, when she was going to be tarping, and then taking soil samples. And I think she will probably tell you that it helped her stay on track, and she did a great job doing that and getting really great data. Next slide, please. All right, and so once we've successfully conducted the trial, we get to move to these last 2 steps, which are analyzing your data and telling your story. So we don't really expect our farmer researchers to be statisticians, and analyzing the data can be kind of a daunting process. Our guide does explain some of the theories and tools that a farmer could use to analyze their own data, but we also walk farmers through that and basically help with the data analysis, because we do have experience with that. So after we've done that data analysis, we then sit down together with our farmers and look at the statistics and see what the data is telling us. And so this information, along with the farmer researcher notes and observations that they've taken throughout the trial or the growing season, help tell the story of the on-farm research trial. And here's the fun part, is where the farmer gets to look at the practical application of what has been learned from the data and how this could be applied to their farm, and then see what other questions might have come up during the process. And so those are the steps really quickly. There's a lot more detail in our guide, and I just want to highlight that this was our pilot year for doing these trials, and there was really a learning curve for all of us. So at the beginning, our participants came to us with a lot of excitement and great ideas for research, and I think we all learned a lot about how to encourage our farmers and accommodate our farmers' wishes and their desires and needs. And also it took us a little bit to figure out how to scale back or expand research so that an appropriate trial could be conducted and useful data could be garnered from the research. So I'm going to stop talking. We're fortunate to have 4 of our farmer researchers here today, and I'm going to let them tell their stories now. So I will pass it back to Thelma so that she can introduce our first presenter. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Heather. And I think it's really important to note that in telling their story, they're not just telling their story now through these presentations that they're giving, but each of the farmers is going to, with our help, pull together a final report, and these will be available online for free, accessible for folks to know what was done and also just gain some insight into the process. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first presenter. Mary, if you could go to the next slide. We have Maggie from Salad Days Farm, who was looking at the effect of solarization on beneficial microbes in high tunnel over time. So Maggie, I'm going to pass it to you so you can share a little bit more about your farm, your operation, and what your experience was like.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So my name is Maggie, and I'm in Salad Days Farm. I'm located in central Kentucky. Our climate zone is like a 6B. We're a diversified certified organic vegetable farm. Been doing it since 2015. We use like the market garden style production, so very intensive. Lots of production in a small amount of space, double cropping, really taking care of the soil and our environment at the same time. We grow year round. We have markets year round. We attend 4 farmers markets every week, and those go through the winter. We have an on-farm store that we sell that is all self-serve. We also serve restaurants, some local food access programs, and all of this we do on less than 2 acres. So my research project kind of evolved out of another research project that I did with the University of Kentucky. They approached me and they wanted to do solarization in one of my high tunnels to combat root knot nematodes. I didn't have a big problem with them, but they were present in my soil. So we did that, I think, 2 years ago. And it helped with the nematodes, but I also saw a great benefit in terms of the weeds with the solarization. And so I wanted to implement it more on my farm, but I had a concern about the microbial activity in the soil. We work really hard to protect our natural environment, natural predators. We use very little OMRI certified sprays even. We use a lot of like exclusion and stuff like that. And especially in an area like the high tunnel, which is just high real estate, we use it in the summer, in the winter, year round. It's very important on our farm. We have 5 of them. So I wanted to see, is using the clear tarps to solarize going to do harm to the microbial activity in the soil? As you can see in the picture, those blue, like I call them gravel snakes, they're used to weight down the edges, and when you solarize, you want that completely sealed off. So you can imagine how hot it gets under there. And in addition, being in a high tunnel that is completely closed up in the summer. So does that heat kill the microbial population? Or do they go deeper in the soil? Do they come back? Do they have to population regrow? And so, yeah, that was basically my question. At what point do they come back, if at all? And, am I doing more harm than good? And so I'm very rooted in science and data. And so this was a great opportunity for me to test this, working with the foundation to see if I could answer this. So what I did is using the plot map, we very randomized, you can see on that right picture with the blue. That is the high tunnel, and we did 8 sections, randomized. Some were uncovered and some were covered. So I tested the soil in each bed before I covered it, and then after 2 weeks, and then after 4 weeks. And so I bought this kit. It's called a microbiometer. The whole thing was about $500 because I bought extra like test kit sample things. But I could do it on my farm. I didn't have to send everything off. And so what it measures is the microbial biomass and fungal to bacterial ratio. So you can kind of get a picture of the health of your soil. And so doing these tests at the like appropriate time, you know, I could kind of see what was going on because you can't see microbes. So you just and I think I was very surprised by the findings. You know, I kind of figured, oh, they'll come back eventually. You know, I just kind of figured they went deeper in the soil, you know, to escape the heat, but would take time to come back up. Well, I was wrong. Actually, that the solarized areas, so the parts that had plastic on it, the microbial mass went up. I don't have an exact answer for this. Part of the reason might be that there's more moisture under there because it's contained and not drying out. But I don't even need to know why, really. I'm just happy to know that I'm not doing any harm by solarizing. Working with the foundation was great because I didn't really have to do any of the science data analysis part. I basically like, here are my numbers, and they made it all happen in the research way. For anybody that is interested in doing a project, I highly recommend it. There's always lots of things on my farm. I've always wondered, well, how about if I did this and this? But being able to pair up with everybody is great, keeps you on track, gets real data answers, you know, some funding to pay for the supplies and equipment and your time. And everybody is great to work with, very accommodating. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maggie. We really appreciate you taking the time to join our pilot cohort and investigate your questions. So I'm really excited for your findings and that you're moving forward confident that you can continue to do your soil solarization.
Thank you.
Again, anyone who has questions for Maggie, please go right ahead and put them in the chat. I do see a comment in the chat. We'll address these at the end of the presentation. So we'll move on to our next presenter. And I'm really excited to pass it off to Jorge Reyes of Reyes Vineyard. Jorge is a newer farmer in the organic space, transitioning to organic, and he was doing mulch application around his grapevines to see how that would impact weed suppression and affect the grape sugar content. Jorge, I'll pass it to you.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on, I guess, where you are in the country. So my project is very, you know, kind of non-scientific, but very simple. You know, I'm a very new. I bought my vineyard about 3 years ago, and it was pretty much an abandoned vineyard, basically. So about 85% of the vines were pretty much dead. So I'm in the process of kind of replanting it. You know, replanting it. I actually replanted it, and most of my vines now are like 2 to, you know, some of them are up to 30 years old, but it's only like I think about 250 plants. So this gives me an opportunity to actually, you know, start kind of like from the very beginning. I do have some plants where I can practice making my, you know, making my final product, which is going to be probably organic wine at the end. But anyways, before I kind of get started here, I want to let you know how I ended up with that, you know, with that project and that question. when I applied for the grant, I basically didn't know what a research project really was, or how to implement it, how to document it, and everything. So I just, I had some challenges in my vineyard. Basically, I had a lot of gophers, and that was my original thought. I wanted to do some kind of a project around the gophers. See, I could manage and control the gophers. I also had weeds also around the vineyard, lots of weeds, and then water availability was also kind of a big issue for me because like I said, I'm off the grid. So basically, I have I had to optimize all my resources, my energy, my water, etc. Everything kind of revolves around the sun for me, for the most part. And like I said, I'm about 38 miles east of San Diego, and I'm about 2,600 feet above sea level. So I'm kind of a little bit out in the boonies, kind of. So the summer, we get pretty much hot and kind of dry weather a lot. So our rainy season basically is kind of November through January and maybe some in February. But after that, there's basically no rain at all, no water. So I depend 100% on my, on a well pump, and again using the solar power, and so it's kind of like challenging. So I wanted to get a good research project where it was going to benefit me, and be able to utilize the resources that I have. So again, I'm in the process of transitioning over to organic, and so my ultimate goal is to do organic wine, and it's really hard to find organic wine in this area here. So I want to see what I can do with it. Anyways, getting over to the research question, based on all the resources and everything that I kind of talked about, I wanted to see how I could benefit using mulch in the vineyard. So when we had our first brainstorming session with the foundation folks, and they kind of helped me narrow it down to a small project where I could it was obtain data that was going to be helpful and help me around my around my resources that I had, the challenges that I had. So during our first brainstorming session, we basically came up with a question, and so applying mulch. So I applied about 2 feet in each direction of the trunk of the vines, and wanted to measure, see how it's gonna impact the moisture retention, because my water situation is kind of critical. And then also I wanted to see if it was going to suppress the weeds, and then like a byproduct was also, would it impact the sugar content of the grapes? Okay, so again, the question was basically is, why the questions, and again is, I mentioned the climate. Okay, very warm, dry climate, availability of water. So I wanted to see how I could, irrigate my vines and minimize the water usage, conserve the water as much as possible, and then see how it's going to impact the weed growth and that type of thing. So those pictures right there kind of show the vines that are not, obviously I didn't mulch, so you can see there was a lot of weeds, and I would spend quite a bit of time trying to clear all those weeds around the around the base of the plants, because they do compete for for water and nutrients as well. So you want to keep that area at least within around the vines free of any weeds. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Okay, so basically, like I said, mine was not very scientific. Basically we identified 2 areas in my vineyard that we were gonna basically test the mulch and no mulch. So in different areas, and like I mentioned, I was going to measure the moisture retention, basically using a soil moisture sensor, basically using a hydrometer at the end when I did my harvest, is measure the sugar content. And then the weed growth, was basically more of an observation. So you look at the vines, and you could see, obviously from the pictures, was that the ones with the mulch basically didn't have hardly any weeds at all. So I didn't have to spend any time, any labor, clearing them with weeds or anything like that. Okay, the moisture content was very evident. I think that's about the only thing that I kind of use a little bit more of scientific. So you can see the graph there. The mustard colored bars there show the vines that had the mulch, and you can see, you got the scale down at the bottom, and you can see that definitely the mulch actually had a lot more moisture, or had more moisture than the non-mulch. And also the weeds, there was hardly any weeds at all in the mulch vines at all, and the other ones had quite a bit. So I know that it saved me, it's gonna, in the future, is going to save me quite a bit of time by doing this throughout the vineyard. And also another byproduct was that when I did measure the sugar content of the grapes, when I did the harvest, it seemed to be a little bit higher. Like all the the mulch vines, the grapes had a little bit of a higher sugar content, and I don't know why that is, or why that happened. Maybe it's just a coincidence. I'm not sure, but I want to do a little bit more research in the future on that. See if you can kind of control, when the vines are when the grapes are gonna ripen. If you can make them ripen earlier and more evenly, that's actually a good thing. Next slide. Okay. So again, my takeaways here is, definitely, was very beneficial for me to do this experiment with the mulching. Definitely saw an increase of moisture retention. By looking at the pictures, the weed suppression was outstanding. I'm very happy with that as well. And the ripening, I guess I got to do a little bit more research on that. I don't know if it was just coincidence or what happened, but I like the idea that it was a little bit higher and evenly. So I may be able to accelerate a little bit the ripening, maybe control more of when I can do my harvest. And then another thing that I kind of noticed too is underneath the mulch, there seemed to be a like a biodiverse habitat there with with a lot of activity there, like bio activity with little there was worms, there was roly-polies, there was other animals there. Microorganisms that did in my mind, it's very beneficial. And for next year, next spring, I'm planning to really add a lot more mulch to my entire vineyard. And I think that will kind of like, the cost will probably pay for itself in just reducing just of the labor that'll be able to reduce. And then I'll be able to control a little bit more of my irrigation as well. I'll be able to maybe conserve a little bit more water, and by extending my irrigation requirements a little bit out. Overall, I'm very satisfied with with the project and how it went, and I really appreciated the foundation's assistance in this whole effort. And recommend anyone that's thinking about it, just do it, try it, and don't be afraid. The folks at the foundation are very good about walking you through the whole process, holding your hand and helping you throughout the process. And so I'm very satisfied with everything the way it went. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge. That was a fantastic presentation, and I do see some questions trickling in. We'll get to those after we finish the rest of our presentations. So with that, I will get on to our next presenter. Next slide, please, Mary. And that is going to be Nate. And Nate was looking at row planting density, particularly with his radishes and beets. So Nate, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, I'm Nate. It's a little sunny, so I'm trying to keep my screen down. Yeah, so we have a diversified vegetable farm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Been certified organic for a number of years now. We do sort of a permanent bed deep mulch system on about 5.5 acres with sort of minimal no-till production methods. And we're really a high density, high value cropping system. We're grossing a lot of money in produce an acre. We're employing a lot of people, and we have a huge diversity of outlets that we sell our food in. We also have some beef cattle, cut flowers, a pretty robust operation here. And it started in 2011 with my wife. We started it from scratch, bought vacant land, and in 2020 we joined up with some other farmers, and there's sort of a more robust business model now with there's 4 co-owners of the business. And so for me on sort of the production side, it's really important that that we are, sort of maximizing our profitability in the small space that we're growing in. Can go to the next slide, I think. We're single, double, triple cropping a lot of beds through the season. We grow a lot of successions of the same things again and again across the farm. And we have fast turnovers, and so maximizing yields really can make the difference in profitability for us and making it worthwhile to grow a crop. And something like radishes and beets that we plant, almost literally every week of the growing season. If we can tweak, a 10% yield, marketable yield increase out of a bed by changing a variable, that can be really meaningful at our scale, really at any scale. So what I've also found in this growing production method is there aren't a lot of standards for, row spacing, seed density, because we're sort of in this wildly fertile, high organic matter growing system where there's just not a lot of information. And the traditional resources, either universities or seed packs, about how to plant things aren't really applicable for this growing style. So we've sort of determined that we have to just be able to try things ourselves and see what works. And so this, the opportunity to do a little research project here to compare row density in our beds for radishes and beets was important, because we're always trying to adjust our production methods to have the best growing system we can. And so while we wanted to do this for radishes and beets to sort of suss those out, we also thought that this would be an exercise that hopefully is applicable year after year for all the different crops we grow on our farm. And because we're certified organic, we have a lot of record keeping systems already in place for yield, planting schedules. Like we have a pretty data heavy collection system already going. So I sort of wanted to see how far we could push a research trial like this into our existing setup. So basically, on the simplified version, we just compared 5-row versus 6-row radish density in our fields, and we compared 3-row to 4-row beet density. And my hypothesis was that basically we could just grow more marketable radishes in the same growing space by switching from 5-row to 6-row. It also would let us use a different seeder that would actually make fewer passes in our fields when we're hand seeding We have a 3-row seeder. So by going to 6 rows, it means just 2 passes instead of 5 passes as a single row seeder. And for the beets, so some labor savings. And for the beets, we were finding that our beets were maturing so quickly in the 3-row system that we were actually losing marketable yield to oversizing. And so we thought that actually increasing the density might slow down the growth rate a little, and we'd end up with more marketable beets at a sort of smaller size, and overall just bigger, greater yields. So that was our sort of hypothesis, and we wanted to, and I guess I don't know if it's in the next slide, but the setup was that we were just trying to, instead of doing all at once treatments for like radishes and beets, we had treatments be basically every week we're planting these crops for radishes. So we just did a side-by-side comparison every week, a 5-row bed and a 6-row bed for radishes every week for 5 weeks as our replications, which isn't a very scientific replication in hindsight, but it was sort of a proxy for how we wanted to collect data on our farm and whether or not we could make that data be useful and learn something from it. And the beets, we basically did just 2 of our successions, a comparison side by side, 1 row of 3-row, 1 row of 4-row. And so basically what we found was that there wasn't a statistical marketable difference between the 3-row and the 4-row beets. We sort of had it in some ways, maybe we just didn't have enough data, enough relevant data. And we didn't have enough replications for the beets. And then, if you go to the radishes, we also didn't find any statistical difference between the 5-row and the 6-row radishes. And we also, and I maybe could have suspected this, but because we did, different successions instead of just multiple replications, we found that from week to week, there were wild sort of variations in our overall yields. And that was probably due to environmental conditions, the weather. For like the first replication was in early April, sort of the very beginning of spring. So we had some like very modest yields in that first replication. And so the data, while we were able to like notice some things, and we did some sort of like subsampling where we took different observations, what we sort of found was that it was really hard with the data we collected to draw any firm conclusions. But it did get me thinking a lot about how we can collect better data and how we can sort of learn from this. The thing that became clear to me really quickly was that we should also be just looking at total population, in a bed, as opposed to just row density. We didn't change the seeding density in row when we switched to more rows for either of the beets or the radishes, and that probably would have had a significant impact. That's my next hypothesis, would be to change the in-row density. And also just the importance of, if you are trying to collect data, for on-farm research, really setting it up, as much as we did collect a ton of data and really good data, because of the way we set up the trial, it was a little hard to draw significant conclusions and to sort of compare the data, because it was so different from week to week and it was hard to explain that. And so I think if I was going to set something up like this in the future, I might just take a smaller snapshot in one planting. And even if it would take longer to actually set up that specific trial for that one replication, we collected so much data over so many different, over 3 different crops essentially. And maybe we could have simplified that down and learned something a little better off of one of those crops. But it was really awesome talking with the foundation team and being able to soundboard all these ideas and sort of thought processes. And it was really helpful for me as someone that wants to continue, without sort of this technical support and background always available to me. I think I had I have a good sense for sort of how I can continue these sort of like once-off on-farm trials that hopefully will like keep us improving and coming up with a catalog of best practices for growing crops here. And hopefully we may be able to share some of that someday with other farms, because a lot of that information doesn't exist. But also every farm, it turns out sort of needs their own catalog. And I think, we have a lot of books that we, started when we started farming, you lean on the research from other people, but ultimately, every farm is different, and all the growing conditions and your specific soils and drainage and all and climate are different for everyone. So, it felt really important to me as sort of a profit-driven farm to come up with our own sort of research to push our own growing practices. And so I feel like this really helped me with a foundation for how to create that catalog and what sort of is good data and useful ways to set things up so that you can actually learn something and draw a real conclusion.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nate. That was really helpful. And again, there are some questions that are popping into the chat, but we will get to those at the end. And I will now move on to our next presenter, Rhianna. Mary, next slide. Perfect. Who was looking at occultation tarping and how that impacted soil health and weed termination.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to hear everyone's presentations, and appreciate everyone being here today to hear about our projects. This is really exciting to share. My name is Rhianna Simes. I live down here in Southern Oregon. I have with 2 young children, and I have a farming background. But specifically, I've taught soils for a long time with the Oregon State University Extension Service. And so I'm really excited to share about this project that took place on our farm. We have 10 acres here in Southern Oregon. The property in 2020 was completely burned to the ground through the Alameda wildfire, which burned about 2,000 homes in this area. And so our farm is kind of unique in that it kind of almost reset and started again with some of those weed successions. We have a beautiful silty clay loam, and we are certified organic through Oregon Tilth, and we are very strictly no-till. I also have funded research with the Western Sustainable Research and Education through USDA, and we're also part of the Soil Inventory Project to measure soil carbon. So part of what I'm excited to share with you is about my 10 years of success with occultation tarping using reused vinyl billboards as a smother and to use them in my farming system. But first, it's important to me to share about, I was really inspired and was able to learn directly from Dr. Elaine Ingham, who really coined and provided the research and the whole framework around the soil food web, really looking at the biology of the soil and the importance of that ecosystem beneath our feet, and how that really, when we have healthy soil biology, we have a net positive nitrogen, and there's really no need for fertilizers if you have healthy soil biology. I was also really inspired by Masanobu Fukuoka, who wrote The One Straw Revolution. And his style, he also came from an extension background, and he really came to farming in Japan having really looked at the ecosystem and observed nature to see where's the best soil in nature. And let's follow and mimic what's those processes that are happening there. So he really, Masanobu Fukuoka's translator, Larry Korn, actually came to our property and talked to us directly about natural farming. And it's really with the influences, those two influences of the soil food web and the one straw revolution, that I became completely enthralled with the opportunities presented through occultation tarping. Next slide, please. Great. So a little bit about occultation tarping. Part of what occultation means is to make dark or something that's hidden. So we use vinyl billboards. So we're taking a waste product that would be going to a landfill and we're giving it another life. Some of my tarps that I've been using, I've literally been using the same tarps for over 10 years, and they are not creating microplastics, which is important to me. So I've used this method on a number of different scale farms, on different crops. And the important piece is that the occultation tarping is temporary. It is not plastic mulch that's laid down and sits for a season. It's a temporary application, 4 to 6 weeks, that you use it as a smother. Part of how it's different than the solarization that was shared earlier is that Elaine Ingham taught us that the soil food web actually becomes active in the darkness. It requires darkness for the soil to kind of come alive and really eat and participate in bringing those nutrients through the system and making them available to plants. So the way that we set up our design with occultation tarping in mind was I was really determined to understand how occultation tarping related or would reflect differences in tilled soils. So again, as a no-till farm, we use these tarps so that we can terminate plants while keeping the soil stratas intact, keeping the soil horizons intact. So the Organic Farming Research Foundation helped me to create this split plot design where, again, the main factor was tarping, but also that there was a subplot, there was kind of a sub-variable around the tillage. And it was also important to me to use the measurements with the Soil Health Institute is utilizing, trying to create an international framework and rubric or matrix for understanding soil health. So the Soil Health Institute recommends measuring these properties of soil health: total carbon, nitrogen, organic matter, wet aggregate stability, those indicators, and are trying to create that kind of solid foundation for everyone to similarly measure soil health. And we also used the other measurements we took were weed counts by percentage, both in the percentage that were terminated and the percentage of the cash crop or polyculture that germinated. And so these were, you can see kind of the help I got with some of the split plot design and that layout, which was really helpful for me to have that technical assistance to kind of think through how this would be laid out on our field. Next slide, please. Great. Well, I'm so excited to share these photos of some of the results. Part of what is important to me here is it's important that you understand that in Southern Oregon, we have a Mediterranean climate. So we get almost zero rain in the summer. We get all of our rain mostly in the fall and winter. So in that context, soil moisture is really critical for us. And so in these pictures, you're seeing literally the grassy field that was fallow. So we came upon this is part of our fields on our farm in May, grassy fallow field. We spent 1 hour pulling occultation tarps onto those fields and those plots. We weighted them down to make sure that there was good soil contact and that they wouldn't blow away. You can see the after photo, the before there, just the grass. After, you can see that I would say higher than 95% of all the grass was terminated and dead. And the close up there of the soil, so the soil is, again, this intact, and that the dead grass is also intact, leaving this really nice long carbonous mulch layer. So there's an added benefit that the soil is still covered by organic matter, which was really important to us. So then we spent 1 hour seeding our polyculture directly in. We did no other management. We pulled the tarps, we pulled them off, and then we seeded our polyculture directly into those plots. And you can see in that bottom left-hand corner there. And we had great germination in those plots. Part of how, we really started to think about and tried to articulate what's happening in these beds, just while we're looking at this picture, is really that in these grassy fields, it's almost like a buffet room where there's a buffet table with all this food layout, but the doors are locked. The microbes, the creatures, your plants cannot access them. When you pull an occultation tarp on top of that grass or organic matter, that vegetation, it's almost like unlocking the door to that banquet hall and saying, soil food web, come and eat in this dark, moist environment. And so what we saw is that not only is the soil food web eating, but they're making those nutrients available to the plants that then you're able to seed directly into that medium. Next slide, please. So we were really thrilled to see that our trial, our project did reflect similar results that we've seen in other trials, that we were able to reduce soil erosion, but most importantly, we were able to retain soil moisture. And this is critical for us. Again, having almost zero rain throughout our whole growing season. You can see in the figure there that the areas that were tilled versus the areas that were not tilled, but the significant variable here being whether they were tarped or not. So pulling that occultation tarp over that grass, not only did it kill the grass and terminate the plants we didn't want, but it retained so much moisture that our percentage of germination for our cash crop or our polyculture was exponentially higher than those that did not have tarps. So what we saw is that even if folks are tilling, there's really an opportunity to pull a tarp or to cover that soil and retain that soil moisture. And that was really important for our operation and helped us to understand another added benefit that we weren't aware of before, and part of why we're really excited about sharing occultation tarping with you today and trying to help other farmers access this technique. Next slide, please. So some of our takeaways. So after 10 years of working with this strategy and this technique, and knowing that it was effective, being part of this program and having support from the Organic Farming Research Foundation helped me to develop a research project that could really show through data the efficacy and other benefits to this strategy. It's critical to our no-till organic operation, but I think that it has significant opportunities to really help other farmers and other folks who are trying to manage vegetation to do so fairly inexpensively with very little labor costs. And that is a critical component. It's also helped me this project has helped me to leverage other opportunities for my research, and again, helped me to become enrolled in the soil inventory project. And I am pursuing other USDA funding around education and demonstration. But I'm really grateful for the technical assistance from the Organic Farming Research Foundation and helping me with things like the statistics and analyzing the data. Those were just skills that I didn't really have, and that they were able to really take my passion and the data and really help me understand what we were seeing in the field. And so I'm really grateful to have been part of this project, and really thankful to those who helped me reach this point. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're really excited that all of our farmers have shared their findings. And just to keep us on track, I'm going to move us to Mary, who's going to talk about the FLT, or Farmer-Led Trial Program, application process. Our window is currently open. She'll share a little bit about that, and then we will move into our Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Thelma. And thanks so much to all the presenters. It's been such a joy to work with you all this season. And I'm just so grateful to have learned from you all and learn a little bit more about your production practice. I did see a lot of great questions come in, so I'll keep it brief. But as Thelma said, I'm Mary Hathaway, and I'm the Research and Education Program Manager here at the Organic Farming Research Foundation. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about how to apply for next year's funding and next year's program. First, of course, I want to thank our funders. This is one of the many, many programs that are a part of the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, which is a part of the USDA. This amazing infusion of cash, this initiative involves a lot of organizations that are across the country that are doing great things, mentorships, field days, providing new resources, and just opportunities for organic to thrive in our industry. So we're really grateful for this funding and to get this program off the ground for us. Okay, so let's talk about it. Our application portal is now open. I'm sure there hopefully is a link in the chat. So if you all are interested in checking it out, we do our best to make sure that this application is very straightforward, easy to fill out, doesn't have a high barrier. We just really want to see that you have a good question, something that you can test on your farm, something that's going to make an impact on your farm, and something that you've really thought about, right? So you do have a little bit more time. The applications are open until December 1st. This was a question I saw come into the chat. The grant cycle is 1 year. So what does that mean? That means that we will be accepting applications to December 1st. We hope to have announced who is going to participate in the program by February of 2025. And that doesn't mean your program or your trial starts right there in February. There's obviously a lot of steps. Everybody's growing season is a little bit different. Everybody's trying something different, right? Different crops, things like that they're looking at. So within kind of that year, right, you're going to start that trial. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have like long-term funding. So we do expect like by the time you start within that year, you're going to close out your trial. If you have specific questions about that, feel free to ask them in the chat. Or we have other resources that I'm going to talk about. Another big piece of this is the grant funds. So we do offer a small stipend. It's $1,500 when you're selected to participate in the program. The $1,000 is given at the front to kind of help with some of these front end costs, and the final $500 is dispersed once the project is complete. I'm just going to make a nod. This is not a lot of money, right? But we do know that there is a barrier to entry on doing research on your farm. Maybe it's a new seed variety you want to try. Maybe it's a different practice you've never done. Maybe there's materials or the lab fees to actually test your soils in a different way than you have in the past. But also just you might have to put land out of kind of your normal production practice to be able to do the replications, to make sure that the data you're getting is something that you can use and that can aid your production practices. So we do know there's a barrier. We do know probably that does not cover even a bit, right? But unfortunately, we farmers are really used to being underpaid for our efforts. Sorry to continue that trend. So the big juice, though, is the technical assistance from myself and the rest of the staff at OFRF. We talk to the farmers about every month, maybe sometimes more, a little bit less, depending on what's going on when your production is, or what phase of your project you're in. But we are here. If you have questions, we're here for them, you know, either through Zoom calls or through emails, whatever is easy. Any of the steps that Heather spoke about at the very front of the of our webinar here, we are kind of walking through each of those pieces, right, to make sure that, you know, the way that you're going to collect the data makes sense. The question, even from the beginning, makes sense. And then once we get all these numbers, that those can kind of be put in a way that makes sense. And then the other piece is the farmer commitment. And that's the biggest thing, right? So all of these farmers that spoke today did something different than they would have, right? There was extra time they had to put into collecting those records, into like labeling things to make sure that like, hey, when I'm taking this data, it's like aligning with what this is. And of course, even just the time of like talking it through, you know, really thinking through a project takes some time. So we do really rely upon the fact that this question is important to you and you're willing to give the time and energy back into it, right? Because hopefully at the end of the day, it is something that aids and improves your production practices. Okay, so who's eligible? Anyone that is a farmer or rancher in the United States or its territories is eligible. Your farm must be certified organic or in transition to organic. There is a question about this on the application. We do ask who your certifier is. Anybody that's participating just needs to have management abilities, like a lease or some sort of ownership of the farm. Basically, we just want to make sure you have that decision-making ability over the course of the grant program. And in the grant and in the applicants, we are giving preferential treatment to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as veterans and beginning farmers. Basically, if you're farming organically, any of our priority areas for this program is probably something that's going to fall through. These are kind of basic, these tiers of sort of major production challenges, right, that we see as organic farmers. This is a pretty brief question, but I think it's also something that kind of just makes you kind of frame, like, what is it that I am doing and where does this kind of fall? And we have a lot of help to help you apply. I hope anybody that's participating in this webinar is considering it, right? Or maybe wants to talk to somebody or other farmers that this might be a good fit for. Before you do submit your application, I recommend if you want to, if you have questions, you can go onto our website. You can schedule a one-on-one consultation with me or another staff member with OFRF just to kind of talk through, you know, hey, I have a question about the application, or I have a question about my question for a research trial. We're here to help and answer those. We also on the website have a really robust frequently asked questions section. So if it's something you're kind of thinking about, I definitely can't tell you enough to just go scope it out and see if your question is answered there and gives you some ideas. We also have the rubric for the application on our website. So this just gives a little transparency on how our reviewers will evaluate your application. And just like I said before, really what we're looking for is, you know, are you eligible? And do you have a good question, right? Is it going to, you know, have an impact on your production practices? Is it something that's testable within the kind of the framework of what we're able to do with a year research trial? And then finally, and probably most importantly, please, 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 before you submit an application, check out the Farmer's Guide to Conducting On-Farm Research. It will really help answer kind of some of your preliminary questions. Maybe think like, this is right for me, or maybe I need to do a little more research, you know, check out what else has been done. Or just kind of give you an idea of like, do I really have the time and the materials to do this? I think you do. I believe anybody can do this. It's just whether or not the time, the place is right for you too. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Thelma because it looks like there's a lot of questions in there.
Thanks, Mary. That was fantastic. And I am going to popcorn some of these questions around just because some are a little more relevant to what you just covered. Erin was asking just with respect to the funds, if they're set up as reimbursement or available upfront. I'll answer that. We offer both options. So we can do a one-time stipend payment upfront if a farmer needs that upfront, or we can also do reimbursement based on tax situations. We try to offer that flexibility for the people who are participating in the program. And then with that, I'm going to transition to the second question that Erin had, which is just thinking about funds. You know, was it sufficient for your project? So from our farmers, like what were some of those unforeseen needs that may have come up in terms of your budget? And I know that Maggie has, you know, some comments on that as well. So I'm going to pass it to you all. You can each just provide any insight you might have.
Yeah, I can speak. So certainly with my project, you know, it would have been great to test exactly what microbes are in the soil. However, like that testing to send it off to a lab was just cost prohibitive, you know, with the $1,500 even. So that was kind of a limiting factor. But fortunately, I already owned plastic to use. So most of my costs came from the microbiometer. I would say, yes, taking land out of production is a cost to a farmer for sure. So having that buffer of payment certainly helps.
Thanks. Anyone else? Jorge, I think you also, when you started your project, you had a bigger vision for something you wanted to do.
Yeah, you know what? It's not the money. The money helps, but I think it's the resources that the foundation provides. That's a big help. You know, I'm very beginner farming, so you know, everything that I'm going through is kind of new to me. So you know, being able to you know, having the folks to talk to and you know, being able to get you know, I guess you know, some of your questions answered. How do you know how to structure data collection, all that stuff. I think is the real benefit. The money, you know, it does help, but as everybody mentioned, you know, we have to be resourceful with funding, and you know, you got to be committed to wanting to do something beneficial for your farm, you know, and it's not going to cover, the money's not going to cover probably everything that you have in mind, but you know, like I said, the folks technical expertise and availability is really the benefit.
Thanks, Jorge. There is another question for you here. Someone asked, what kind of mulch did you use? So if you know the plant material for that, and someone else was asking about your observations with rodents under the mulch. And I know that's something that we did discuss.
Yeah, you know, the mulch, I don't know the exact, you know, the exact name, but I know that it was organic mulch that I bought from, you know, one of the providers here in the San Diego County area. And as far as the rodents, you know what? I didn't see a lot of like gopher mounds or anything like that. Obviously, with you know, when it was covered. But I normally don't have a lot of issues besides the gophers, you know, with other type of rodents. And I actually did see a rattlesnake underneath the mulch one time, you know, but you know, maybe that scares the rodents away. Maybe he ate it, the rodents. I really don't know, but I didn't see a whole lot. But you know, I pretty much, my philosophy is, you know, to basically live with nature as much as possible. So you know, besides, you know, trying to manage the gophers, everything else I try to, you know, live with, you know, with what they have. You know, we kind of share the same environment, and you know, I don't like to harm other animals, or even the snakes. You know, I try to relocate them as much as possible if they get close enough to an area where I'm, you know, where I'm working quite a bit. But no, like I said, I didn't see rodents under there.
Thank you, Jorge. I have a question regarding occultation tarping. When placing your occultation tarps down, is this done during rainy season or during the dry season?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I use them year round. The speed where that the soil kind of wakes up to eat, if you will, or the speed that weeds are terminated definitely are variable depending on the season. In the warmer months for us, spring and summer, I'm able to, again, turn around, you know, lay a tarp and pull it off in between 4 to 6 weeks. So just about 2 months. I have a clean planting bed, but when we get our rainy season and as the temperature drops, it does take a bit longer, but I have, you know, on some of my plots or some of the perennial weeds, I keep the tarps on longer, and have had success both in warm season and in rainy seasons. And I'm just going to put my email in the chat. If anybody wants to learn more or is using tarps or just wants to geek out about it with me, I'll just include my email and would love to chat more with folks who want to get on the occultation train.
Thank you. Maggie, there was a question regarding microbial diversity, which you kind of already answered. So I just wanted to make sure that the audience did hear that. So there is an opportunity, hopefully in the future, maybe Maggie, where we can have more funding and you can do more soil tests to understand what those functional groups and what the diversity and density of those microbes were. I'm going to move to a question from Erin, who is curious to hear from both the program managers and the farmers regarding this program, what worked, maybe some of the things that were challenging about the process that could help inform our expectations for future years. Noting that this being our pilot year, Erin, it was a learning curve, as we mentioned. As a remote organization, we don't have the privilege to go to the farms and help these growers set up their trials. We also have to manage a grower's expectations, right, and their excitement for wanting to, have many variables, and recognizing then later, like, hey, we really need to scale it back and isolate your variables, and make sure that those measurements are being taken in a way that is very clear. And so I would say for each of our growers, there is an opportunity for us as an organization to have had maybe clear expectations of what data collection would look like, just to make sure that there's a good protocol in place. And we've been changing that moving forward. We did have turnover. So we did have someone that was overseeing these projects previously, and then right in the middle, we switched. And so we set up internal systems for us to be able to better organize and track these. And as we're working, realizing how we can improve this for the future cohort. So that's some of the things that we were experiencing from our end, but I'll pass it to our farmers to share their experience as well. So, what was it like for you? What worked, what was challenging, and maybe what could have made it different, better?
I can speak quickly. So I will say that when I was applying in my head, I was going to say, oh, we have one high tunnel that is, completely covered in plastic, solarizing, and one high tunnel that's not. And that, those were going to be my comparatives. Because, another part of using the solarization is, so I have like in high tunnels, big problems with sclerotinia. And I should have thought about it better and looked at more of the resources that they have about planning your trial, because it was set up actually that, there were 8 different sections in one high tunnel, and that it completely makes sense to have just, in comparison that they're all treated the same. So, not my entire high tunnel got, rid of sclerotinia, but so those are just things to think about. It might be set up in your head one way, but to actually do the proper science, it might need to be done differently.
Yeah, I think I'd like to jump in if you don't mind. I think that's a great reminder. And one of the challenges that I had, or lessons learned, was, when we were laying out the split plot design on the field, it was when the grass and things were much shorter and I could see everything and everything was very designated. And I had my flags and my numbers and I had my plot map. And then as the season progressed, some of I had created boundaries and margins, and then those started to grow. And so then when I tried to photo document my work and my research, the photos didn't illustrate as well as they could have. I think if I would have in the future maybe had some string or some clearer impenetrable boundary, just like baling twine or some kind of boundary marker, so that it was so that my photos and my photo documentation would show up a little bit better. So that was a lesson learned that I think could have improved, the maybe telling the story and sharing kind of where we went, and being able to use some of the tools to measure that, whether the percentage of germination and the percentage of cover, I think could have been better if I had a little bit clearer margins. So that was a lesson learned that others might benefit from.
I think I was really obsessed with this idea of doing research within the systems that we're already growing in. And, a lot of farms are already collecting data, whether you think of it as data or not, with, harvest logs and planting dates and all these things. And so I really was trying to push this idea to in my sort of trial that I wanted to sort of make the trial work within our already existing crop plan and already existing, way that we're collecting data. And I think there were some pros and cons to that. And I spent a lot of time talking to this team about how, the data we collected, in my mind, sort of was more informative of what I want to try next. And that the fact that just because the data didn't end up being, scientifically or statistically significant didn't make it less valuable as a process. And I guess, in hindsight, I wish maybe, for this kind of process, would be, I think it can be frustrating sometimes to not get all the way to the answer of a question that you have. And sometimes the answer is, well, you just maybe can't know. From one year to the next, maybe there's environmental conditions that are going to be the greater effect on some treatment that you have over any sort of actual, difference in what you're doing. Maybe it's a dry year and occultation doesn't make a difference because there's already 0% moisture. So how can you add moisture or something like that? Or it's so wet that it doesn't matter, that you had tarps down because it was wet, an unusually wet year anyway. So that was, I guess, finding sort of what you're looking for, I think is just as valuable as doing it, as part of I think this team was really good at acknowledging that, we're also trying to farm and make a living. And I think the money that, for our research trial, I put all that money into labor because I think the farmers here, really value getting paid for the work that they do. And this wasn't just my project. I relied on, this like whole farm team to do it. And so that felt really important to me. But at the same time, I think, it would have been nice to lean a little bit into the more scientific side of things and on the expertise to set up a trial that would have sort of a little bit more definitively given us some information. And, but I think it was worthwhile either way for us.
Okay. So in my case, I didn't really have any like a formal project or anything like that. Mine was more like, I had the issues that I was kind of working, and that I wanted to resolve. So I just, basically did a very generic application. And, my first brainstorming session with the foundation folks is what really kind of helped me narrow it down and, make me think more about, an actual research project, like actually collecting data and that type of thing. Because, in farming, even though I'm very new at it, a lot of it is just kind of like trial and error. And it's kind of like, you keep a lot of that stuff in your head. And what helped me was basically, learning how to collect the data, how to structure it, how to display it, and how to use it, to further your, how's going to help you in the future. And in my case, like I said, even though it was just simple mulching, I saw a lot of benefits. And because of this, I am going to invest quite a bit more in mulching, my entire vineyard. If you're thinking about it, just write it up, write down your issues. And, I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way to apply, but, you never know, you might have the best experiment or the best research project. And if you don't apply, you'll never know, and you'll get a lot of benefits out of it, even though there's a lot of questions about it. And, how are you going to implement it? What are you going to do? Is the funding going to be enough? that type of thing, it's like, but it's like anything else, you gotta just kind of just do stuff. That's always helped me in life, is just do stuff, and then things kind of work out. And I'm glad that I did my project.
We're glad you did your project too. We're glad you all carved out time and planned accordingly. And yes, there are things we could have done differently, and we're all learning from it. But I think it's an exciting opportunity for all of the farmers who are interested in applying. Please do know that the link is there. I also wanted to mention, I know someone was saying, what about, doing multi-year trials? And so for our program, it's a small program and we don't have funding for farmers to do it every single year. People can reapply, but we know we do have limits to what we can provide. So it would be great if anyone continued. And like Nate said, he wants to continue to look at this data and experiment and play and see what changes over time. Another thing is, sometimes non-significant findings are not a bad thing. If you're comparing 3-row, 4-row, 5-row density, and then you find the findings are non-significant, that means then maybe the difference is not so big that you can't switch to having higher density within your rows. I do have another question for you, Nate, and this is from Tim, just thinking about the radishes. Did you use the same variety in each bed or mixed rows? And could that be one of the reasons why you saw those growth differences?
Yeah, we planted, the beds were, we trialed 2 different radish varieties, but we kept them separate. So the beds were entirely either Rover or French Breakfast were the 2 varieties we used. There was no interplanting or interseeding of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I think we are almost at time. So I just want to be cognizant for the participants and for our presenters as well. Again, thank you so much for joining the Organic Farming Research Foundation and all of our farmers. And if you have any questions about our program, you can email mary@ofrf.org or thelma@ofrf.org. Please feel free to reach out to us. We are very happy to hear from you all. Visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll keep you in the loop for whenever we have new opportunities.